In this episode, we are looking at a group of security ideas that often show up together because they all answer one basic question: who should be allowed to do what, from where, and under what conditions? For a new technician, these terms can feel like a wall of letters, but the important thing is to hear the purpose behind each one instead of trying to memorize them as disconnected vocabulary. Least privilege, multifactor authentication, MFA, single sign-on, SSO, privileged access management, PAM, mobile device management, MDM, and data loss prevention, DLP, all exist because organizations know that access is one of the biggest paths to both productivity and damage. When access is too open, people make mistakes, attackers move faster, and sensitive data leaves places it should never leave. When access is too restrictive, work slows down and support teams spend all day fixing exceptions. The real skill is understanding that these controls are not random rules. They are practical ways to reduce risk while still letting people do their jobs. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to start is with identity and access control as a broad idea. Identity is about proving who someone or something is, and access control is about deciding what that person or thing can reach once that identity is known. A technician may not design the whole system, but they often support account issues, permission problems, policy changes, device enrollment, and login complaints. So they need to understand what the controls are trying to achieve. In a healthy environment, the goal is not to trust everyone equally and hope for the best. The goal is to make trust specific, limited, and reviewable. That means a person in accounting should not automatically have the same rights as a system administrator. A phone should not automatically be treated like a secure desktop, and a login from an approved office should not be judged exactly the same way as a login from an unknown network at an unusual time. Identity and access control works best when it assumes context matters and that a single password should never be the whole story. Least privilege is the idea that a user, application, or device should have only the access needed to perform its legitimate task, and no more than that. This sounds simple, but it changes everything about how a secure environment operates. Many security failures become much worse because someone had more permission than they needed, which gave malware more room to spread or gave a careless user the power to alter or expose information that should have been protected. If a front desk employee can read payroll files, install any software, disable protections, and access shared administrative tools, then a simple mistake becomes a much larger problem. Least privilege reduces that blast radius. It does not assume people are bad, and it does not mean an organization distrusts its staff. It means the organization understands that accidents, phishing, stolen credentials, and software misuse happen, so access should be limited to the narrowest level that still supports the job. That way, when something goes wrong, the damage has less space to travel. One common misconception is that least privilege only matters for administrators, but in reality it applies to almost everyone and almost everything. Standard users, contractors, service accounts, shared devices, background processes, and even temporary support sessions all need boundaries. A technician sees this when someone asks for local administrator rights just to install a printer or run one application. Sometimes that request is legitimate, but often it is a sign that the environment should solve the problem in a better way rather than permanently expanding the user's power. The same principle applies to shared folders, remote access, cloud apps, and support tools. If someone needs higher rights for a short task, those rights should be granted carefully and ideally for only as long as needed. Least privilege is not about saying no to everything. It is about saying yes in a controlled way with the narrowest permission for the shortest reasonable time to the smallest necessary set of people or systems. MFA adds another layer by requiring more than one kind of proof before access is granted. A password alone is something a user knows, but that one secret can be guessed, stolen, reused, phished, or leaked. When a second factor is added, such as a code from an approved device, a prompt that must be confirmed, or a biometric factor like a fingerprint, an attacker now has a harder job because they need more than just the password. For technicians, the value of MFA becomes obvious when users ask why it is necessary even though they already have strong passwords. The answer is that passwords fail in real life far more often than people want to admit. Users reuse them, websites get breached, attackers trick people into typing them into fake pages, and malware can capture them silently. MFA does not solve every identity problem, but it reduces the chance that one stolen secret becomes an immediate compromise. It turns a single unlocked door into a door with an additional checkpoint. At the same time, MFA is not magic, and that is important for beginners to understand. Some users think once MFA is enabled, they are fully protected from account abuse, but attackers adjust their tactics. They may try to overwhelm a user with repeated approval prompts, trick a user into approving a fraudulent sign-in, or steal session information after the login is complete. That means MFA is strongest when it is combined with user awareness, good login design, alert monitoring, and sensible device trust policies. A technician might support a user who keeps receiving approval prompts they did not initiate, which is a warning sign that someone may already know the password. The right response is not just to dismiss the pop-ups and move on. It is to see the prompts as evidence that one layer is being tested and that the account may need password resets, session review, or closer investigation. MFA improves security because it makes account misuse harder, but it works best when people treat suspicious behavior as meaningful rather than routine. SSO is often introduced as a convenience feature, but its deeper value is control and consistency. Instead of having separate usernames and passwords scattered across many systems, SSO allows a user to authenticate once through a trusted identity process and then access approved applications without signing in over and over again. That makes the experience smoother for users, but it also helps organizations centralize how authentication is handled. A technician benefits because account changes, access removals, password resets, and policy updates become easier to manage when identity flows through a coordinated system rather than a pile of unrelated logins. It also reduces the temptation for users to create weak habits, such as reusing simple passwords across many services or writing them down because there are too many to remember. SSO is not just about ease. It is about reducing friction in a way that can actually support better security. Because when people have fewer separate credentials to juggle, the organization has a better chance of enforcing strong and consistent identity practices. Still, SSO creates an important trade-off that students should understand. If one identity becomes the main path to many services, then protecting that identity becomes even more critical. In other words, SSO reduces password sprawl, but it can also create a high-value target. That is why organizations usually pair SSO with strong authentication, session controls, device trust, logging, and careful access assignment. A technician may hear a user say that SSO sounds risky because one compromised account could open many doors, and that concern is not wrong. The real answer is that unmanaged separate accounts are also risky because they create blind spots, stale credentials, inconsistent security settings, and accounts that may remain active long after they should be removed. SSO becomes safer when it is part of a larger access strategy rather than treated as a shortcut. The organization is not relying on one easy login alone. It is using one managed identity path and protecting that path with multiple supporting controls. PAM focuses on accounts and actions that carry elevated power, which means it is especially important for administrators, senior support staff, service accounts, and any role that can change systems in major ways. Not every login is equally dangerous. A compromised standard user account can still cause real harm, but a compromised privileged account can disable protections, create backdoor accounts, alter logs, access restricted data, or push damaging changes across many systems very quickly. PAM exists to control, monitor, and limit that higher level of access. In practical terms, this can mean separating everyday accounts from privileged accounts, requiring stronger approvals for admin actions, limiting when elevated access is available, recording sensitive sessions, or using secure methods to store and release administrative credentials. For a technician, The big idea is that powerful access should never be casual. The more authority an account has, the more tightly it should be governed. PAM recognizes that some work requires elevated rights, but it insists those rights must be handled with more discipline than ordinary user access. A beginner might assume PAM is just least privilege with a fancier label, but there is a useful distinction. Least privilege is the broad principle that everyone should have only the access they need. PAM is a focused set of controls around the most powerful access in the environment. Think of it this way. Least privilege shapes the general design of access, while PAM pays special attention to the accounts that can do the most damage. A help desk technician may not operate a full PAM platform, but they absolutely need to recognize why an administrator should not browse email, web content, and routine business apps from the same context used to manage servers or security tools. Mixing daily activity with privileged activity increases exposure. If malware or phishing reaches that privileged session, the organization may lose control far more quickly. PAM tries to separate ordinary work from high-risk administrative actions so that privileged power is used deliberately, observed carefully, and exposed as little as possible. MDM enters the picture because access is no longer limited to office desktops on controlled networks. Phones, tablets, and portable devices regularly connect to email, files, collaboration tools, and internal applications, which means the organization needs some way to enforce security expectations on devices that move around constantly. MDM helps manage that reality by applying rules to mobile devices, checking compliance, and allowing support teams to enforce settings such as encryption, screen locks, approved app behavior, patch levels, and remote wipe capability. The reason this matters is simple. Mobility increases both convenience and risk. A lost laptop or phone can become a data exposure event. An out-of-date mobile device may connect to business systems while lacking current protection. A personal device used for work may blur the boundary between private activity and organizational control. MDM gives the organization a way to reduce those risks without pretending mobile devices can be secured through trust alone. It acknowledges that mobile access needs management, not just good intentions. DLP is about preventing sensitive data from leaving approved boundaries in unsafe or unauthorized ways. That can include email, cloud uploads, removable media, printing, copy and paste activity, screenshots, or other forms of transfer depending on the environment. The deeper purpose of DLP is not simply to block everything. It is to recognize that data has value, that some data is more sensitive than other data, and that users do not always realize when they are moving protected information into the wrong place. A technician may support a user who wonders why an email attachment was blocked or why a file could not be copied to a personal drive. The answer is that the organization is trying to keep controlled information, customer records, financial data, intellectual property, or regulated material from being exposed accidentally or intentionally. DLP is especially important because many modern security events are not dramatic break-ins. They are quiet losses of sensitive data through ordinary workflows that were never meant to carry that level of risk. When you step back, a pattern starts to appear. Least privilege limits baseline access. MFA strengthens identity checks. SSO centralizes authentication flow. PAM protects powerful accounts. MDM governs mobile devices that touch business data. DLP helps stop sensitive information from leaving safe channels. None of these controls does the whole job by itself, and that is the exact point students need to understand. Security layers exist because real environments are messy. Users forget things, devices get lost, credentials are stolen, attackers adapt, and business needs keep changing. If an organization relied only on passwords, then stolen credentials would be enough. If it relied only on MFA, then authorized users could still have excessive permissions. If it relied only on least privilege, then lost phones and unsafe data transfers could still create major incidents. Layering works because each control covers weaknesses that another control does not fully solve. A helpful way to think about this is to imagine a normal employee who signs into a company laptop, opens cloud applications, receives email on a phone, and occasionally needs support from the help desk. Least privilege keeps that employee from having more system power than necessary. MFA makes it harder for a stolen password to become a full account takeover. SSO allows access to approved applications through a more centralized and manageable sign-in process. If that employee later changes roles or leaves the company, access can be adjusted more consistently because identity is centrally tied to services. Meanwhile, if an administrator needs to work on that employee's system, PAM helps control the high-risk support actions behind the scenes. If the employee's phone is used for work, MDM helps ensure it meets security expectations. If the employee tries to send a sensitive file to an unsafe destination, DLP may detect and block it. Each control sees a different part of the same operational story. For new technicians, one of the most important lessons is that these controls are not there to make work annoying. They are there because support teams are often dealing with the gap between human behavior and secure behavior. Users choose convenience, reuse habits, skip updates, approve prompts too quickly, and move data into places that feel useful in the moment. Organizations respond by creating guardrails that reduce the chance that one poor decision turns into a larger incident. A technician who understands the purpose of these controls is much more effective than one who only memorizes names. When a user is frustrated by an access denial, device enrollment requirement, blocked attachment, or extra login step, the technician should be able to explain the reason in plain language. That explanation builds trust. It helps the user see the control not as random bureaucracy, but as a practical measure that protects accounts, devices, data, and the wider organization from preventable damage. As we close, the biggest idea to carry forward is that identity and access security is really about shaping trust with intention. Least privilege answers how much access someone should have. MFA answers how confidently we verify a sign-in. SSO answers how authentication can be managed more consistently across many services. PAM answers how the most dangerous levels of access must be controlled more tightly. MDM answers how mobile devices can be trusted and governed. And DLP answers how sensitive information is kept from drifting into the wrong places. When organizations layer these controls, they are admitting an important truth. One defense is never enough in a real environment. A strong security posture comes from combining limited access, stronger identity checks, privileged account discipline, managed devices, and protected data flow so that when one layer is stressed, the others are already there to help hold the line.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.